In today's video, we have lots of NHL news and rumors to discuss. The rumor mill tonight focusing on a variety of teams like the Calgary Flames, Toronto Maple Leafs, Ottawa Senators, Montreal Canadiens, Buffalo Sabres, Minnesota Wild, and the Florida Panthers. Plus, we have a few more signings, an update on the NHL schedule, and is there any chance Marc-Andre Fleury could come out of retirement? We'll discuss all that and more coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here in tonight's video. First up, we actually had a bit of a surprise announcement today from the NHLPA. The Christian Fischer, an NHL veteran of only 28 years of age, has announced his retirement from professional hockey. Not usually a common thing you see at this age unless players are, going through a lot of injuries, or in some cases if, they've had a difficult time getting contracts or getting work. But that's not the case with Fischer. I mean, obviously somebody who came into the league with probably higher expectations to be a higher level offensive player. But for a lot of guys, they have success at lower levels, are quite an offensive threat. Get to the NHL, the game doesn't always completely translate. And then sometimes they have to reinvent themselves to play other roles and be effective as a checker, penalty killer, whatever, And Fischer was able to do that. He's competed in 523 games, put up 137 points, was a pretty well-respected bottom six checker, penalty killer. Obviously one of those guys you could put on your third or fourth line, and he would be responsible and just kind of grind away, get the job done. As for the most part, played with the Arizona Coyotes, ended up in Detroit eventually, and then got traded to the Blue Jackets, where he finished things out. And then his agent was getting a bunch of calls and getting stuff prepared for his free agency this offseason, and he decided he was done. It sounds like, based on his interview that I've seen here in The Athletic, that he actually was thinking about things sooner, and even kind of had decided before the season was over by the sounds of it. But he is going to be pursuing an opportunity in business outside of hockey. It sounds like there's some sort of business venture that he's interested in jumping into with another friend or colleague, and hockey's just not something he's feeling as passionate about anymore. He said it's not something that he feels like completely defines him, and there's other things he wants to do. So, I mean, it's good on him for turning down an opportunity to make a lot of money, because obviously, he probably could have played at least a few more years. I'm assuming he would have got a contract, somewhere in the $1 million mark. I mean, that's a lot to turn down. I mean, yes, he's earned a decent amount in his career, but it's not like he's made huge money over a super long period of time. And I have no idea what kind of business venture he's getting into. Maybe he's very confident he'll make a lot of money at that. Who knows? But some things are just more important than others to different people. So this goes to show you that it's just not a common thing you see. It was a bit of a surprise today, but we certainly hope Christian Fischer is happy with his decision, and best of luck in whatever ventures in business world you jump into next. But we won't be seeing him in the NHL arenas here any longer. We did get an update as well today from one of the NHL insiders, Chris Johnson, indicating that I know the estimated date for the NHL schedule was around July 16th, but apparently there is a possibility it could come out a little bit sooner. Somewhere between the 14th and the 16th is when the schedule is going to end up coming out. So stay tuned for that if you're looking forward to try to plan to get to some games or see when your team's going to be playing and all that kind of stuff. It won't be too much longer. We're probably looking at about another week and a half or so before we finally get the full schedule release. We only had a couple signings here today. One came actually really late last night after I'd already put out my final video for the day, and I just didn't think it was a big enough deal to get into a video all by itself for it. But Anthony Beauvillier, pretty good player, pretty good signing, stays with Washington after going there last year. He had a pretty good run with them after being acquired by the Capitals, and makes sense, I think, to stay, especially in Washington. I think before they made any more signings or did much more, they're kind of waiting to see what was going on with Nikolai Ehlers. They were very much in that mix with the Hurricanes. Of course, the Hurricanes ended up being successful in landing the player, but the Capitals, I think, before they did too much, wanted to see if they were getting him or not. So they get Beauvillier signed on a 2-year contract at $2.75 million per season. I know prior to landing with the Capitals, Beauvillier has kind of bounced around a fair bit. really since he's left the New York Islanders, where he started his career, had a decent start, scored some big playoff goals, but eventually ended up getting moved. He ended up going to I believe he went to the Canucks in the Horvat deal, and then kind of bounced around a few other places from there. He's been with like 3 or 4 teams here in the last few years, but that should give him a little bit more stability and play a top 9 scoring role for the Capitals. And we also saw today the Colorado Avalanche announce that they've signed Alex Beret-Boulet on a 1-year, 2-way contract as well. That's just a short time after signing 40-year-old veteran Brent Burns to a 1-year deal. It's going to be interesting to see how long Burns plays. I wonder if he'll have any chance at getting the all-time Ironman record that Phil Kessel had set. He'd have to play a full 82 for the coming season, sign another contract to play for the year after, and get at least halfway through it. But I'm curious to see if that will ever come to be. At this point, it's hard to say with absolute certainty that the Avalanche are going to have him in their everyday lineup. So I don't think teams are going to be too interested in playing him just for the sake of the streak. They'll play him if they feel like, he's earned it, I guess. So we'll see how training camp goes for Burns with his new team, which is going to be a little bit weird to see. I know it was kind of weird to see him with the Hurricanes after being a Shark for so many years. Another piece of news today that I found interesting, Alan Walsh, of course, one of the longer-term, more successful player agents around the NHL, in case you don't know, has a podcast that he does as part of the SDPN network called Agent Provocateur, where he talks to Adam Wilde as co-host, and they have guests on, and they obviously discuss a lot of things that, within the world of agents and, behind the scenes things that we don't always hear about. And he did reveal something that I thought was rather interesting today in their latest episode, which I believe was their kind of wrap up for their season, which he's had 4 seasons now. It's actually been a pretty successful podcast. Like I said, it's because it's different. You don't hear really agents really speaking out too much publicly, whether it be in a podcast form or through social media, as much as you do like Alan Walsh. But of course, Alan Walsh was the longtime agent of Marc-Andre Fleury, and he said on July 1st, even though it was well documented, well known that Marc-Andre Fleury had retired and would not be intending to play in the upcoming 25-26 seasons, that he had 5 NHL teams reach out to him to see if there was any chance that Fleury would change his mind and unretire and come back to play. It's a little bit of an indictment on the goaltending game around the NHL. We know there's definitely teams that are looking, and there's teams that are looking and not finding what they like, and there really is an opportunity. If there could be a few more goalies magically appear somewhere, there's definitely work to be had for sure. But interesting to note that Fleury, of course, who's had a remarkable career, and is he the same goalie he was when he was winning a Stanley Cup with the Penguins? Maybe not, but you know what? He's still effective. He still got the job done, and was still a great guy to have on your team. So interesting to note that somebody who was made it well known for quite a while that he was retiring and gone through the official process of announcing everything when the season was over, to get that much questions and activity around a potential comeback on July 1st was just rather interesting, and I thought I would mention. It makes me wonder if there are teams that are still struggling to figure goaltending out, and I know Edmonton's a prime example of this. We know that they made it pretty clear that it didn't sound like they were going to come back next season with the same tandem. I don't think it's a given that Stuart Skinner was going to get moved, but I thought it was a possibility. Or the other option is that maybe Calvin Pickard is moved, and maybe they bring in more of a goalie who can be in a tandem with Skinner, but play more, and eventually come playoff time, maybe take more of a leading role, somebody with more experience. And they've yet to figure that out. A lot of the goaltending chairs around the league have been kind of taken here through free agency and some of the trades we've seen. I still think there's a few opportunities out there that do exist, but we'll be curious to see if they find a way or not. And if they don't, there's belief right now that Edmonton might go into the season, to begin with, at least, with Skinner, Pickard, and then try to make a move, sometime early in the season. I wonder if Fleury's going to continue to get calls for teams that need goaltending help early in the campaign. I'm not sure what it would take if there's anything at all to drag him out of retirement, but interesting to know how much interest there was to see if that was even a remote possibility. In the rumor mill, we're going to take a look at a variety of things. There's still a few names that are still kind of hot topic and really not a whole lot new going on. We know Bo Byram is kind of, in my opinion, I think the Byram situation to some degree might be holding up the trade market because Bo Byram, we know, was looking for a long-term lucrative deal. Doesn't seem like Buffalo wants to give it to him, which is why they're been leaning towards trade for some time. It seems like he wants to have an opportunity to be a consistent number one defenseman in the NHL. Feels he's good enough and earned the opportunity. And there's teams out there seem to be willing to give him the chance. And I mean, the main teams linked to him right now are the same teams we've heard of for the last little while, including the Calgary Flames and St. Louis Blues. I think are two of the forefront right there. LA's in there too to some degree. But the big thing with Byram, though, is that a potential offer sheet that might come. There are teams that we're told are very willing to put together a lucrative offer sheet to land him if the Sabres don't soon play ball here and figure out a deal to get done. I know with the Andre Miller situation with the Rangers, there was a threat of an offer sheet, which is what led to that trade getting done. Same thing could happen with another RFA, which we'll get into here in a few minutes too. But with Byram, no, I think there's a lot of other D that are rumored to be on the market, and I just don't know that they're going to move until teams know if they have a shot at getting Byram. Because if you listen to a lot of the D men around the league that are reportedly available, you hear the same sort of half dozen teams that are kind of in the mix, and I think they're all kind of waiting to see here what goes on with Byram. Obviously, he's arguably the best defenseman, and where he's younger too and can be a big piece of your future. That until that situation gets settled, I don't know that you're going to see a lot of activity on the D front. I mean, we've heard the Sharks need to move a few guys, right? So you're looking at probably Mario Ferrero, maybe Henry Thrun, maybe one of the other guys. We've got a plethora of them now, right? We've heard about maybe Connor Murphy out of Chicago might be a name. Ben Hutton out of Vegas. Like, these are all, for the most part, depth guys. Ferrero's a guy who could probably play top four for a lot of teams, but, just not a lot of names there that are, higher end. Matt Dumba's another name in Dallas. Those are all defensemen that are all definitely available for trade if the right situation can be found to move them. But they're probably being held up here with Byram. But it's the same teams, same threat of an offer sheet, and we'll see what's going on. But there's definitely, from what we've heard from day to day, it seems like there's ongoing dialogue. It's still a very touch-and-go situation when something's going to actually come together. And right now we're still kind of at that spot. Of course, Dave Pagnotta's reporting that Rasmus Andersson still kind of in a similar situation, except we have on his newest trade board that he just put out yesterday, not only is Vegas mentioned as being kind of a preferred destination for Rasmus Andersson, but it's also mentioned in there with the Dallas Stars, and he references the fact that if they can find a way to move guys like Dumba and Lyubushkin, they'd love to get their hands on Andersson. So if you do see the Stars starting to clear space by a move involving one of those other guys or both those guys or something along that, then that's probably a setup move to get Andersson. I don't know that Calgary would necessarily have interest in either of those players going back, but the Dallas Stars are very much interested along with Vegas, and it does sound from what we've heard that they're kind of Vegas is supposedly the preferred destination, but Rasmus Andersson has to sign a contract extension because most teams aren't going to trade for him without it. If it doesn't get done and it drags into the season and becomes a deadline deal, he'll probably have to accept being a rental and then get moved or get signed later, but we'll see about that. Now, speaking of other trades, let's look at the Montreal Canadiens here next. We know that they've been linked to a variety of things. They've gotten some stuff done. They made a trade, Mailloux, for Bolduc out of St. Louis, which was a good deal, I think. They made a big trade with the Islanders to get Noah Dobson. So the trades have been happening at a higher rate for Montreal, and I think they've been good deals so far. But they still have a big glaring need with their team, and it's a number 2 center spot. It is possible if they can't figure it out and they don't find a trade that they really like, we could see them give another opportunity to Kirby Dach in training camp, see how things go. And while maybe they reevaluate early in the season, and it could be a early in-season move. You often see this, I find, in the first month or two of the season. You'll see some teams be like, okay, this isn't working, that isn't working, and then they sometimes will try to address needs if they can early on rather than wait till the deadline, because they want to make sure that their team is not only stacked for the playoffs, but you got to get to the playoffs first, otherwise it doesn't matter. And in case of Montreal, I think a couple of names that are out there. One is Joshua Waugh. At one point considered a very good prospect. I still think there's value here with Waugh, but when they go out and they get a trade for a guy like Zach Bolduc out of St. Louis, that just tells me that they don't have as much confidence in Waugh being that guy. Because really, I think, to me, that's going to block him from really having an opportunity on that roster. And there's lots of other talented young forwards in the organization now that are, Demidov comes in and passes him immediately, and then you've got other guys on the way. I don't really know that I see a spot for Waugh. And, after having a few years now to develop, if that hasn't happened yet, it seems like time is running out for him to really have any hope at being a full-time Montreal Canadian. So the belief is that he is a name that they likely would be willing to include, or when they're having these trade talks around trying to find a number 2 center, that he would be a name to watch that could be offered in a package. According to Dave Pagnotta on his new trade bait board, he also has Josh Anderson on that list as well, citing the fact that he's another name that they may be willing to dangle here in a move to get a center. Now, I don't know how much interest there's going to be in Anderson. The levels of interest in his for him to be acquired in the last 2-3 years has kind of been up and down. There's been times when there's been a lot of interest. I think 2 or 3 years ago, when Ken Hughes became the GM of the Habs, he had an opportunity to trade Anderson and was believed to even turn down a first-round pick. Now, of course, he has value. I'm not going to say that he doesn't, but they've obviously had to turn over some of the roster. We've seen them part ways with Dvorak. We've seen them part ways with Armia. Is eventually here in the not too far into the future, you're going to see the same thing with Anderson, eventually with Gallagher. It's hard to say, but clearly Anderson's contract could be problematic as well, and I don't know if they can do it, but basically what Pagnotta is saying is that if they can find a trade for a number 2 center, and if they can include Josh Anderson, and this sounds like at this point they're more willing to do so, his value would be up a little bit. I thought him and Gallagher had a much better season last year than they did the year before. So they still have some term on their contract. They don't have to be moved. They can still play an important role here. You do need some veteran leadership, and they seem to be doing a good job at that. So we'll see, but those are some names to watch as Montreal continues to pursue another trade to try to address that center role they're looking for. The Florida Panthers are going to be a team to watch as well. If you look at their cap situation, technically they are over. I know on Pagnotta's new trade board, he has Evan Rodriguez as being a trade target for some teams trying to take advantage of Florida's cap situation. I've heard other outlets and news outlets mentioning Erod as a name to watch. And you know what? It makes sense. If you take a look at all the players they have that are signed to big long-term deals now, there's not really that many guys that are on those shorter-term, mid-range deals, don't have a lot of term, that are, that you can see them maybe moving. Like a lot of their team is signed long-term now. Instead of a core 4 like you see and heard about it for years in Toronto, it's like a core 10 now in Florida. It's kind of ridiculous. So the bulk of that team is going to be together for a long time. So Rodriguez is a name. He's a very useful, potentially top 6 or at the very least a top 9 forward, depending on where you want to put him. I think he's versatile, can play a variety of forward positions. He's got a lot of good experience here the last couple of years, especially in Florida, and I got a good shot. I think he could be a forward that generates some interest for some teams, so you definitely want to keep an eye on him. Now, of course, the other situation with Florida is with Matthew Tkachuk's health. We heard all about his somewhat gruesome injury that he's dealing with. We don't know quite clearly yet if he's going to be having a big surgery or not. It sure sounded like it was quite possible, but even he had confirmed during the Cup celebrations that it wasn't 100% given yet. But there is a possibility he starts the season on a long-term injury reserve and that they can kind of punt this decision down the road, because if that's the case, they're not going to need the cap space. They'll have it through the long-term injured reserve system, and they can kind of make a decision later on. So we could see Rodriguez move. To me, it is the most logical choice if they're going to do it, and or it could wait. And a lot of that's probably going to depend on the health of Matthew Tkachuk. So they'll probably take a wait-and-see approach on that. I know in Toronto, of course, they're looking for a top six forward. They continue to kind of, search the trade market since there's not much available through free agency at this point. And I know Rodriguez's name has been a name that's been brought up in Toronto media as maybe they should make a potential target him. I mean, obviously they brought in numerous other players from Florida. They got Ekman Larsson, they got Stolars and Lawrence, and why not bring in another one? I mean, really, he's a good player and could be a good fit there. So I mean, that is a name that you could see. But I know on the TSN Bell show Overdrive, which is normally with Hayes, Odog, and McLennan. Of course, they're all on vacation now, so you get different guys covering for them. But I know they were talking about some pieces in Toronto that they can move to get a top six, because with Marner's departure, it leaves a big gaping hole. They really weren't able to address it through free agency. They acquired Michelli from Utah, who's going to play in the top nine. It could be a piece to help bring some of the offense that Marner provided before, but they need, like I said, they're going to have to do this by committee. They're going to have to add more to have a shot at being equally as good offensively, at least you would think, based on what they have. And they were talking, I've seen in the last number of days, I was looking at all the Leaf media, different conversations about who do you trade. There's some belief that they probably have had conversations with Morgan Riley's camp around his known trade clause and what he considered waiving. The belief is that they probably had those conversations, but probably not looking at doing that right now. So it kind of leaves them with talking about, would you move Easton Cowan? Of course, their top prospect. Obviously, do you want to trade a 20-year-old prospect who could have a bright future for somebody who's more established and think it can kind of help you win now? Or what do you do in that case? Is there any chance you consider moving a goaltender? You had proven last year you had a great tandem with Stolars and Wall. I know I've seen some debating about Joseph Wall. I'm like, well, to me, between Wall and Stolars, you're not going to move Wall. I'd be very, very careful with that. They both played very well at times. I think they have a solid tandem, but you need multiple goaltenders. And I'm not sure that you can have both of these guys for too long anyway. I mean, if at some point if things continue the way they are, Wall's going to want to be more of the starter. He's a little younger. I'm not sure how long Stolars is in Toronto Maple Leaf. He could probably stay for a couple of years, but it just kind of depends on how things go, depending on the contract he wants and what role he's willing to accept. I would just be careful with the goaltending. It kind of leaves you down to not having a lot of options of what you're going to trade. You've got Easton Cowan and Ben Danford, your two top prospects. Would you move those? There are some names out there, like I said, a Rodriguez or a Brian Rust out of Pittsburgh. I'm not sure that he's the answer, but he is a guy who's proven top six forward, who's played a lot with Crosby over the years. I don't know that that's really going to move the needle that much. They're not anywhere near the kind of players that Marner was. So I'm not really sure what you do in that case, but I'd love to know what you think. I personally would not trade Cowan or Wall for either of those guys. If there's a stronger top six forward out there that makes sense that you can have on your team for a long, long time and it's going to be very productive, then maybe, but we'll see. I know Marco Rossi's another RFA we're watching as well. There's still belief that there could be an offer sheet there. We know the Wild seem reluctant to go anywhere near the contract demands he's looking for. Belief is he's looking at a long-term deal around $45-50 million total. Teams that are currently listed and linked to Rossi, they're having various levels of interest according to the new trade bait board with Dave Pagnotta on thefourthperiod.com, including the Philadelphia Flyers, Vancouver Canucks, who we've heard about before, Nashville, Calgary, Buffalo, and to some extent Montreal. I think the Habs would have some interest here because we know they're looking for a number 2 center, as I mentioned earlier, but I'm not sure they want another player with, that small. I mean, they do have a lot of small forwards already. I mean, you could do worse, that's for sure. But when you think about what the playoffs are like, I do wonder if that might be something that they might be cautious of. But obviously lots of teams. I know Vancouver was a team that was heavily interested before. Calgary is a pretty interesting team too. Same with Buffalo. We know Buffalo would like to get a top 6 forward back if they trade Byram. Byram to me is not a landing spot in Minnesota. So I don't know, is there a 3-team deal between Calgary, Buffalo, Minnesota, where Calgary gets Byram, maybe Buffalo gets Rossi? Then what does Minnesota get? Something from each of those teams. I'm not sure what that would be, but could something like that materialize? Makes me wonder. But again, Rossi's another name to watch when it comes to offer sheets and RFA trades here coming up. And also on the trade bait board from Dave Pagnotta, I noticed he still has the Senators linked to both Jared McCann out of Seattle and Rickard Rakell, which is a new one out of Pittsburgh. We've heard lots about the Penguins and Erik Karlsson, Brian Rust, Rickard Rakell, all being available. Teams want to talk to the Penguins, and Dubas is willing to move any and all of them for the right deals. It's the first time I've seen Rakell linked to the Senators. Now, he does have a reasonable contract for what he can provide. I don't think that the Ottawa's in a position where they feel like they absolutely have to add another forward to play in the top 6 or top 9, but if they saw a good trade with an opportunity to upgrade, I think they will strongly consider it. And maybe it's not even a deal that they do right now before the season. It might be something we see more either in season, depending on if there's injuries or whatnot, or to make a deadline acquisition. There are a couple of names that, like McCann's been linked to the Senators and other teams too for an extended time. But Rakell is new. There are other teams out there. I know LA was a team for Rakell, and a few others too. So we'll see. We know the Penguins are wide open for business, so curious to see if anything happens. I personally don't think we're going to see another Senators trade involving a forward, but I wouldn't completely rule it out either. Steve Staios is kind of, fly under the radar and likes to surprise people with these moves. He's pretty stealthy that way, so we'll see what happens. Let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time.